If you missed this show, you fucked up bad. Hey everyone, CWD Music Reviews here. I am CWD, and this is going to be another edition of the monthly roundup for November, where pretty much I just go through a good chunk of albums that I listened to over the course of November that came out in November, and pretty much giving my little brief opinions about each individual release. Since I didn't have enough time to get out reviews for these, since it's kind of put on the back burner for the rest of the year for the most part. That being said, I do have an announcement for the channel. Reviews, they're coming back. They're coming back starting the beginning of January. I do have enough time to review the Childish Gambino album that's coming out this Friday, so I'm definitely going to listen to that quite a bit, formulate fleshed out opinions on that, and definitely get a review for that out. The reviews are coming back primarily because I got this thing now. I can listen to, anything on the go, now that I have access to Apple Music wherever I go, provided that I still have data. And given that convenience, it definitely is going to be a good aid for the channel. So yeah, that's the plan. Get this album roundup going, review the Childish Gambino, get the top 50 albums list finally structured evenly, or at least in my mind evenly, and do a video on that, and then it'll be back to reviews starting January. I'm hoping to get that Brian Eno album reviewed not too long after the year starts, so let's see where that goes. So on that note, let's get this on the road. I'd rather listen to a My Morning Jacket album. Jim James is certainly a talented musician, and he definitely has a sort of mystifying aura about him. I think Jim James by himself, it doesn't really work as well as he would hope. I'm just waiting for another My Morning Jacket album. That's just me though. I don't really find much memorability to this thing. It pretty much sounds like the album Czarface put out a year ago, except shorter and maybe a bit more conceptual, but it's not all that fleshed out or interesting. But if you did love the hell out of that album last year, you'll probably love the hell out of this album this year. Never been that invested in Common as a rapper, or occasionally an actor, or whatever his pursuits may lead him. But I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on what he's going to be doing for the remainder of his career because of this thing. He has a lot of things to say. He has a very interesting persona. He flows particularly well over this production given by none other than Mr. Kareem Riggins, and the occasional help with Donald Glasper and Frank Dukes. This is just a sound that Common can glide over particularly well, and hey, that leads to a solid album in my opinion. This album sounds like ass. This album sounds like pure, distorted, arena rock bullshit ass that I have no interest in listening to ever again. De La Soul really could have learned a lot in making a comeback album from Tribe, because this is easily one of the best hip-hop albums of the year. The flows are convincing, the lyricism is both fresh and relevant and well fleshed out, the instrumentals are fantastic and consistent. Do give this thing a try. It's cool and all, but I don't think anything this calculated and pristine can have the dignity of declaring any kind of madness whatsoever. If you're someone that unironically has the word post-techno in your vocabulary, then this album is for you. Go nuts. I wasn't really considering putting this within my albums of the year list or my favorite albums of this month, given the fact that this is a soundtrack for the upcoming video game Watch Dogs 2. But it feels more like a Hudson Mohawke project than it does a soundtrack per se. I mean, there's definitely little motif tracks or whatever worked into the album, but even these sound really bombastic, rhythm-driven, and pretty fleshed out for a soundtrack. I think Hudson Mohawke works much better with a concept than he does working with trying to make interesting electronic songs and pieces. It sounds like a few dudes just getting high in their garage, just making this psychedelic jam that goes on for about 20 or so minutes. It's a cool little album. It's not like King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard where this jam goes on for eternity and they make this into like a concept that is particularly intricate. This just sounds like a bunch of dudes just jamming out, and they somehow made that into a 6-track album. And if you're looking for something of that nature, then that album is definitely for you. Metallica had one goal, in my opinion, and it's not that they need to make an album better than Lulu, because number one, I didn't think Lulu was a bad album. I particularly liked Lulu, but given the fact that the previous 2 albums had probably, arguably, some of the worst production Metallica's ever worked with, and Reload was probably the worst album they've ever made, Metallica needed to return to actual form, return to what made Metallica a formidable and fantastic band in the first place. Also, given the fact that the big 4 at the time before this new album was released were pretty much 0-3, and given this album, this makes them 1-3, and I'm particularly pleased with that. It's pretty much my favorite album of the month, since Metallica are doing what Metallica has always done. They're making music that is this intricate, this heavy, this pretty aggressive at moments, and they're definitely doing their sound justice during a time you would expect for Metallica to sound completely and utterly washed out. Instead, I'm pretty much in the minority with this, and I promise you Rolling Stone didn't pay me to say this, but this is definitely one of the best albums of the year. It's not my favorite metal album of the year, but this is definitely a highlight for metal. I honestly can't finish this thing. I've listened to it maybe 1 or 2 times through, but from there, the whole thing kind of just drags. Dance music is supposed to make me encapsulated. Bruno Mars is essentially one of those artists that puts out legitimately good pop music, but then the radio pretty much takes some of the singles and incessantly plays them over the radio to the point where you have no choice but to hate it. This is definitely not as eclectic as Unorthodox Jukebox. It's definitely going into a more New Jack Swing, funk, disco type synth pop thing, and it works particularly well for it. And if you need something that's like smile inducing, if you need something that's fun, then this album is definitely going to be for you, because Bruno Mars definitely has that level of charisma to create a fun atmosphere with music. I never cared to listen to his previous mixtapes, that trilogy that was going on, although I do need to listen to Trilogy at some point because I've heard some of the songs on there are good. Did not like Kissland at all. Thought Beauty Behind the Madness was hit or miss, where the hits were either deep cuts that actually work, or they were some of the most popular singles of last year. And Starboy, yes, this is the sound I think Weeknd works best with. Add to that, there's like a really hidden concept or some kind of really loose narrative going on where it sounds like he has met his match in this nihilistic universe that he himself has embraced over the course of previous albums, and now he's trying to find his way out in this synthetic atmosphere. This isn't going to be like a top 10 favorite album of mine or even a top 20 favorite album of mine, but I think Abel has definitely outdone himself. There was some skepticism for me given the fact that it is The Weeknd. I like him more on features than I do his own standalone albums, but now that I've heard this thing, I definitely dig it quite a bit. So those are my thoughts on the albums that came out this past month. What did you think of any of these? Did you like any of them? Did you dislike any of them? What were some albums that came out in November that maybe I missed? I'm pretty sure there were. And what did you think of those in particular? CW Music Reviews here, signing off.